when I joined the patrol back in '71. So he's a good guy to have on the list.
Been there, done that, huh? Been here,
Yep.
done.
Yep.
So have any of you ever had to be skied down the mountain by the ski patrol?
I'm more comfortable on my skis than I am my feet. They're bigger shoes. My wife tore her meniscus last year. It's kind of a thing with us. She tore her meniscus at Tower 8 on the Husky lift coming down Racers Ridge, and fell and got a boot top break, and she skied down the rest of the way. And I took her to the hospital. I said, well,
man.
She says, I will never go in one of those sleds.
Josie and I have both been in them.
Oh, tons of time, but mainly for fun, not because we were injured. We're better
training.
Yep.
For training mostly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories is when the senior test was here a few years ago, and two of our ladies, Julia Belay and Stephanie Hasselhoon, were at the top of Bonsai, which is our hardest run. It's except for Trestle. It's 65% grade. It's almost a cliff. And the two of them went over the cliff in the toboggan, and the four examiners standing on the top didn't ski down that trail. They walked through the easier trail to ski down. And I said, wait a minute. I said, they passed, right? Because they just did something crazy, to take a litter down that trail. And they did it. They had no problem. And
absolutely.
Yeah, that's Ripley patrollers.
Yep.
So anyone out there who can see the links that Sue posted, if you have friends or family you would like to share how to watch it on Facebook live stream, go ahead and just send that link via email. And we're still kind of in the warm-up phase. So who can give me a can look on the snowmometer? Did I say that right? Snow meter?
How much snow?
We're way behind, folks.
We've
folks
had,
of you who are not in Houghton here, way behind.
Not counting today, and we've only got an inch out there today. So if we count today, we've had 4 inches of snow in January. That's like saying Elon Musk has $1. I mean, it's unheard of. It's just really unheard of. And although we're finishing up our last 2 trails with snowmaking, just pulled the guns off of Lookout today, and we got to start moving that around. And then the tubing park is going to be done making snow tomorrow. And then we're just going to pick a couple of little spots where it's thin here yet, and we'll be done by the end of the week, and we'll have the whole hill 100% open.
It looks great. I can see people going down at night. I have a beautiful view of this.
Nice. From your house?
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, cool.
No, it's a absolutely beautifully, stunningly beautiful.
It's, I mean, when I was a kid, I would have just died to have something like this in my hometown. I'm from the Detroit area.
Yeah. Jim, so there's comments in the Q&A about people going down the mountain in the sled. So poor our friend Jim, who is a teak, who is a Golden M, he lost control one time and hit his head. The ski patrol took him down on a sled one late afternoon. Wow. So my poor little 11-year-old, he fell. Like, he wasn't even doing anything. We were sort of resting and he just fell, and he was snowboarding. And then he was like, my arm hurts. And I'm like, get up. And he was like, oh, my arm hurts. And so I took the little skis up and they skied him down to get him down the bottom mountain. And the guy was like, can you move your hand? And of course, he moves his hand and the guy's like, it's not broken. So I bring him home, right? Because, like a professional told me he's probably fine. And then my cousin was visiting me, who happens to be a medical doctor. And the kid was playing video games with both hands. And she took one look at his wrist and she's like, you take him to go get an x-ray, Jan. So, and sure enough, he'd broken his wrist just falling flat.
That's this year?
No, that was a long time ago.
Okay.
Not here.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes it's that easy. Like, we have those low impact injuries that happen all the time. You'd be surprised, or a lot of them are usually sprains, or a lot of knee type injuries happen at that low impact. But
I was shocked, and I felt like a bad mom too, because I mean, the kid was playing video games though. So
yeah,
we've had a also, speaking of accidents, I just did the math today, but based on last year at this same day, we were at 21 accidents and we're at 36 accidents this year. And I have to think, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. It could be the lack of,
There's not enough snow.
last year we had so much snow. It was always just, you were falling into a big bean bag, poof. And now we're falling. It's not icy by any means, but it's firm, and we keep the top 3 inches nice and soft, but underneath that it's firm.
Hard.
All right, so we're going to go, I'm going to start sharing screen. So let's see if I can figure this out. I want us to view this. No, I did it wrong. I always do this wrong. Stop share. All right, I want to view this. So we're going to get properly started now that it's 6 o'clock. And I want to share screen, this one. There we go. Welcome everybody to Husky Bites Season 7. We are in January of 2023, believe it or not. I never imagined we would make it this far past the turn of the millennium. Remember that? Remember that when that was a big deal? So what is Husky Bites? It's a free 20-ish, which runs on to 30-ish and more interactive Zoom webinar where you can ask questions live. We also show it via Facebook live stream. My name is Janet Callahan. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering at Michigan Technological University, which is located in Houghton, Michigan, a very beautiful place in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And yes, you can access these in many different ways. So we wanted to run a poll, because we always run a poll the first Husky Bites of the season to see who is joining us today. And so if you're a Michigan Tech student, answer that. If you're a pre-college student, so that means you're going to high school somewhere or middle school or grade school. And you can see these questions kind of popping up. If you attended Michigan Tech, if you're a faculty or staff, part of our community here, if you're a friend of Michigan Tech, to answer the best question, and many of you I know are going to fit into multiple categories, including if you're a curious person. And so the poll is coming in. We have already over 100 people answering the poll, and about 78% of you attended Michigan Tech, and about 7% are Michigan Tech faculty and staff. We've got a few students, 3. We got a couple of pre-college students. Welcome, and I hope you're going to learn lots of really fun things about Michigan Tech here tonight. I'm going to move to the next slide. I wanted to show you the what's going on relative to the season. So we are right here in January 23rd, sliding into the future of Mont Ripley, and I will introduce Dan Dalquist, my co-host, in just a moment, who will then introduce Nick and Josie. Our second one will also be kind of snow focused. It'll be focused on Shaggy's Copper Country Skis, which makes skis, with the co-host Ivor Anderson, who's an alum of Michigan Tech. And I'll introduce all the rest of them kind of later on, but I wanted you to see the lineup. We will take spring break off in the true tradition of being a university. And then moving to the next slide. My screen is a little bit frozen. Let's try that again. Oops, going the wrong way. Okay, one last thing I wanted to mention is that there's going to be something really fun happening during Winter Carnival called Days of Giving, and it's Give Back to the Pack. There's going to be 48 hours of giving, and the focus is going to be on quantity of people giving. And any amount is going to really help a lot. We have goals of kind of having a whole bunch of people who've given before, just enjoying the fun of giving. You can give in any way you want to. And if you want to make your gift now instead of waiting till the challenge begins, you can go donate today. And the site to visit would be giveback.mtu.edu. All right. Thank you. I can definitely having navigation problems. Thank you, everybody. I am going to stop sharing. Thank you, audience. Thank you, staff who support us. And thank you especially to our speakers this evening. So it is my pleasure now to introduce co-host Dan Dalquist, who will also be speaking a little bit. And you should feel free to add to what I say about him, Nick. So Dan is a Houghton native. I believe I met you, Dan, like biking along the side of the road, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sounds like Dan.
Yeah, no, Greg and me were biking along and he just stopped. He has been skiing Mont Ripley since 1966 when there were 3 rope tows and a T-bar. And we've come a long way since then. Dan teaches skiing. He teaches mountain biking. He lives in Chassel. His son's a tech grad. He joined Ski Patrol in 71 and served for decades. And so with that, Dan, I kind of turn it over to you to introduce the other speakers and take it away from here.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Josie first, although Nick is going to speak next. But Josie is I'm very proud to know her and ski with her. Josie's a tech student. She's about to graduate and relocate to places northwest called Whitefish, Montana, which we're all jealous of. Josie is a second generation member of our Mont Ripley Ski Patrol, and she is currently the student president of the organization. So she's part of the leadership group on the patrol.
And has been for a while.
Has been
Yes,
for
this
a
is my
while.
second year as president.
Yep. She's both a snowboard person and a ski person. So she switches back and forth, and I'm proud to have worked with her on the skiing side of things. And very
Yes, you have helped me exponentially, Dan, as you know.
very talented young lady. Her dad was a member of our patrol going back some years as well. So we're very pleased to have the Stalmack family on second generation here at Mont Ripley. And my longtime friend and acquaintance, Nick Sirdenis, Nick is amazing. He's got a ski area management degree. He's got a lot of years in the ski business, both out in the big mountains and at Blackjack Ski Area in the Western UP. Mont Ripley and Michigan Tech were very lucky to be able to bring him on board as a contractor to help build a snowmaking system. And then we were wise enough to say, Nick, how about running the facility as our general manager? And that was 25 years ago, Nick, something like that?
2000, so 23
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, so it's
And I basically in 98, the contracting started to do the design work.
So it's been a long time relationship. We've known each other right from day one on this thing. So
You've been in part of getting Mount Ripley to be a better area from before that, from the mid 90s when they decided that, hey, let's make it a better place.
So it's a long time relationship here. Josie, we've got some slides.
Yep, I will get them up right now. And here we go. They're loading, I guess, slowly.
And we're at 158 attendees, by the way.
Wow.
So, yeah, they got a huge audience out there.
Cool.
This
All
is
right.
awesome. So this picture is so appropriate under the sign, El Nino go away. We've had days, seasons like this in the past, but frankly, without snowmaking, it would be far less activity. The ASP on the sign is the after school program that we offer through our public schools every Monday through Friday at 5:30 in the evening. Just a nice advertisement for some of the things that we do on the mountain. Tubing Park as well, which we are close to getting open thanks to El Nino making it hard.
Snowmaking is done tomorrow on that trail.
Yay.
Oh, that's great to hear. Awesome.
Yep. Go ahead, Josie. Next slide. One of our flyers on our big air park. Go ahead, next one. So just a little bit of history here. We're in an area where we've got a lot of Scandinavian people who brought skiing to the Copper Country area as a form of transportation. Then it became a sport. The upper Midwest, particularly Ishpeming, Iron Mountain, Duluth, are very famous in the ski jumping world around the country. skiing became started as transportation became recreation. People started skiing on this little place in this series of hills in Ripley. And that picture that you're seeing is a series of rope tows going up basically what is part of the Husky Bowl for those of you who have skied the hill in the 60s and on. The hill does not look, the facility certainly does not look like that now. There's a lot more trees in places right now where there are snow.
To become a ski hill in the terms of things, it's about uphill transportation. So when you become a hill that has uphill transportation, you become a ski hill, and a rope tow is uphill transportation.
Exactly. Back in 1938, Michigan Tech formed the Skiing and Snowshoeing Club, which then evolved into the Ski Club. Coincidentally, in 1938, our ski patrol at Mont Ripley was formed, which is also the same year that the National Ski Patrol started. Interesting to note, back in 39, there was an effort to do some fundraising for a Swiss-style chalet that never happened. Rope tows added in 39 to 41. Go ahead, Josie. And here's an interesting one. Michigan College of Mining and Technology makes skiing a varsity sport in 1941. And then on into 1947, where a gentleman that a lot of us who skied at the mountain remember, Fred Lonsdorf, came on board as the mountain manager. Interesting to note that Fred was the first full-time ski coach in the Midwest. In addition, Fred was very productive in his racing. For October 48, Mont Ripley starts being mentioned as Mont Ripley. Go ahead, Josie. Yeah, here's another slide of the facility of the territory. Man, what a difference! You can see the Ripley School in the foreground. But 65, we had a T-bar built and the chalet built. 72, the Husky chair was installed and all the rope tows were removed. During that 47 to 76 time period, Mont Ripley became quite influential in the world of alpine skiing in the United States and a little bit of the world. We've had 4 Olympic and World Cup skiers come off our facility: Chuck Ferries, Barbara Ferries, Noni Foley, and the most recent Mary Seaton. Big racing background for a long time, and then it stopped. Michigan Tech dropped varsity alpine skiing in 1980. Tech tried to lease and sell the hill. Thanks to a gentleman who is deceased at this point, but Mr. Dan Lorenzetti, who was influential in a lot of things behind the scenes at Mont Ripley. Dan really wanted an intermediate run on the west side of the mountain, and he took charge of it, and now we have a nice, beautiful run called Danny Boy. It is named after Dan Lorenzetti, not after me. I get that question frequently. 1997, a gentleman by the name of Chip Ransom started our ski school, which has then evolved into a rather large operation that we have at the mountain now. It's just continues to grow. Next slide, Josie. Dan Lorenzetti again. We had a major fundraising issue which involved the community as well as users of the facility. The target was $1 million raised for snowmaking. We got it. Snowmaking and lights were funded and installed, and a gentleman by the name of Nick Sirdenis was hired. And our first night open, this was the earliest night I can remember us opening. We had a December 1st opening, Nick, right? For our first night on man-made snow under the lights, and it was awesome.
Yep. In 2000 is when I was hired on as manager, but in 98, both Bob Grissecci, who was instrumental in the fundraising effort. Bob was the Dan was the arm twister and Bob was the money counter. And Bob's daughter and my daughter raced together, and they had the same coach at Indian Head Mountain. And it was like about 96 that we at Blackjack, when we finalized all of our snowmaking efforts at the ski hill that I was managing at the time. And he asked me a question of, oh, that looks beautiful, because you could see it from Indian Head Mountain looking over to Blackjack. And he, Bob being a money guy, he said, how much did that cost? And I told him, and this was, 95 and 6 that we did that. I said, we did the whole system for 350,000. And he was stunned, because the plan that they had was north of 2 million. And he said, how is that possible? And so I started explaining a little bit. And then that's when Dan and Bob approached me and said, could you come and design a system at Mont Ripley? And I had just finished Blackjacks, both sides. So it was like 2 hills. And I was also working on another hill in Wisconsin, designing theirs. And I never really, just something I know. And it just, how sometimes you just know things, you just know them. You didn't have to learn them. They just are part of you. And that's what snowmaking and everything, chairlifts, snowmaking, grooming equipment, everything associated with a ski hill. I loved it. So I absorbed it, and I just learned it that way, and it made it easy. So I came here, I designed the system, and that 2000 first opening early in 12/1, we only had 6 snow guns, but we had, I brag about this, we have the largest snowmaking pond in the world. No one can. We have Lake Superior, which is connected through the canal, and it's the most amazing water I've ever seen. I'm one of them guys that I go someplace and there's a ski hill. I go check it out. I go check out their snowmaking system. I see what kind of lifts they have, because I love that, and our water is the second to none. It's fantastic water, and it makes great snow, and we're still doing that now. Let's switch to the next slide, see where we're at. Oh, it's a question. So we're in a lot of what we're talking about today, or what I'm going to be talking about, is what we're sliding into the future at Mont Ripley, and what is it going to take to slide into the future. But here's a question from the old days. What was the first chalet? And right now we just call our building the chalet, but we have the Quonset hut, the lodge, or the shake. And let's see, looks like we have some knowledgeable guests.
Yeah. We do.
Which is cool. So the sad part about this Quonset hut is, and I'm giving it away, I guess, but after it was moved from Mont Ripley, it was given to the county, and they moved it about 500 feet down the road at the county garage, right across the street from the county garage, and they set it up. And it's been there. They tore it down this summer. It was basically rusting out from the roof in, and it was caving in. And so I drove by it one day, and it was kind of an unceremonial goodbye. There was an excavator just crushing it all up.
So the correct answer is the Quonset hut.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and we got it right at 48%.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So
Well
does
done.
anyone know what the shake is in the audience? That was it's a long running joke at Mont Ripley as well, as what the shake is and why it's the shake.
Dan, that's your story.
All right, just very, very quickly. We had a student patroller as a patrol director, and he corresponded a lot with various people and different things, but he could not for anything spell the word shack. We built a shack on top of the Husky Bowl, and Pete kept calling that thing the shake. Now this is his son is a senior in high school out in Colorado at the Vail Ski and Snowboard Academy. So Pete's been gone for a while, but to everybody on the mountain, the top shack on the top of the hill is known as the shake, courtesy of Pete Lombardi.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, engineers aren't known for being able to spell well.
No,
Well, it's
exactly.
funny, like on patrol, it's still the shake today, and I never knew until talking to Dan recently that that's why it's called the shake.
Okay, Daly, I'll begin our, I called that defying the laws of gravity right there, when a picture like that of, so again, we talked about snowmaking. That was what brought me here. We have 2 pumps out of the pump house. We pump 400 gallons a minute per pump. We do something called cutting into the curve, so we pump a little harder and we can get a little bit more water out of it. So on a real cold night, we can pump almost 1,000 gallons a minute. We're at around 980. And any of you civil engineers out there, you understand what pumping into the curve means. Some of them quince at it, but it's pushing. That's what we do. We push our machines to the nth degree at ski hills. We have 25 snow guns. Some big fans that you can see in the foreground there, and then over to the left, they're the sticks. The sticks are called low energy, and I like those. They only run on 7 amps, and we still get a lot of snow out of them. It is a labor-intensive process, the whole ski hill. We have Little Mont Ripley. I just counted them today for this. We have 126 employees right now, as of today, running the hill. Most of them are ski school. We're teaching. I figured that out too. It was going to be on somewhere on our blog. It's we're teaching 904 students a week right now. 641 tech students in our PE classes, 185 grade school, I call it grade elementary school kids, in our after school program. We got 60 kids in our Saturday program, little kids from 2 years old to 7 years old. And then our private schools and private school ski lessons and our Ski the Ripley lessons, about 20 a week or so, comes up to about 900 a week. Not only does that make us the largest ski school in the Upper Peninsula, we almost are outdoing the rest of the ski hills combined because of that, especially because of our PE students. So this is a picture of our snowmaking early on and what we start with. And then our average is we try to put somewhere between 12 to 24 inches of snow. The race course needs about 24 because they drill those gates deep into the snow and keep them so that you can see at times in pictures a racer hitting the gate that's kind of curved. They're hitting it so hard and it's got to stay in the snow. So there's a big screw on the bottom that they screw into the snow. So we have to have pretty deep on the race course. Snowmaking system is we're second. Our system is second to none. I've seen all the Upper Peninsulas. I've helped with almost everyone in the Upper Peninsula, every snowmaking system, and ours is by far the most modern and most amazing snowmaking system out there. So we're proud to have that. We'll move on to the next slide. What years? So what year did we've had groomers before, but what year did it really start happening on a day-to-day basis?
And so we've got 4 choices, 1978, 2000, 2010, or 1996. And so far, the audience is generally answering. It's a good mix here.
It's a little bit of a war right here.
Yeah.
We're not sure here, but A is catching up to B. So people are well, I don't know. What's the answer?
So when I started in 2000, the groomer that you can see on the right when you're looking is what we call 01. We have 2 of these orange LMCs, 01 and 03 now. And 01 was 4 years old and it had 400 hours on it. So that means in 4 years, they put only about 100 hours a year onto their snow groomers. We are averaging since 2000 about 1,500 hours of grooming a year. And so we have right now 3 groomers. One is a piston bully. That's our main fleet groomer. And we have another 03 or 01, the 2 that are pictured here, that we go out and use. One of them we are primarily using as a utility vehicle for moving snow guns around and such to make our snowmaking product. So 2000 is, it's kind of a trick question because, they groomed at 78. They had groomers at one time or another at all times, but it wasn't until recently that we had snowmaking that we could actually go out and groom snow at our whim, because a lot of times they had to wait till they got enough snow on the ground.
Well, and to orient us on this photo relative to that first one where there was just the rope toes, which one's the bull?
Right in here. Maybe you can't see it. Right. if to the left is where that rope tow went up. It went up right up the middle. Yeah, if you could go right there. Yeah, it can.
Okay.
Right there. Can you see my arrow? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I can.
Okay,
I can.
that's where that rope tow went. It went right up
Okay.
here
I like
and
that.
then up there. And you know, like I said, I've talked to a lot of skiers that have skied this hill back all the way to the 50s. And you know, the thing that they tell me every time, it's not that, you know, this one time the snow was up to here, or, you know, the long winters, or that they talk about that rope tow. That when you got up into the middle of it, if you were a little kid, you basically hung on and your feet didn't touch the ground, and it was survival of the fittest by all means, you know. And
Exactly
yeah,
right.
I never I had a rope tow at Blackjack when I worked there, two of them actually, and they're a special thing because of the history of it, and they do have their place too as well.
It's a fitness test to be able
Yes.
to
Yes.
get to hold on tightly enough to get to the top and stay on your feet as your feet are going this way and that way.
Josie, next slide then.
Yep.
So our customers are basically our MTU students, which make up about 48% of our customers. And then our community folks, which probably make up about 48% of our customers. And then we have what I'll call our regional skiers, but they can make up as alumni and prospective students, and we have racers that come up. We have a big race at Christmas time every year. So we have 3 sets of customers that we deal with, and we pretty much have saturated our community folks. We've pretty much, of course, saturated our MTU students. Where we really need to grow is our regional market. And our regional market is, every regional market is a 200-mile circle around the ski hill. That's any ski hill in the country, in the Midwest, I should say, draws a 200-mile circle around their ski hill, and that's their market. Of course, if you go out west, you know, it's different because people fly in from all over, in Colorado and Utah and California and such. So that's where we need to grow. Our on snow services is we do have racing. That was one of the charges that was given to me when I came to bring racing back, because to be a homologated race course, you had to have snowmaking. You couldn't have a homologated, and homologation is a certification for USSA racing. And so we do have that now. So we have hosted CUSA races. We do have high school races and so on. We have a snowboard school now, which I bragged about being one of the largest in the Upper Peninsula. When I came here, we had Chip Ransom. He was our ski school director and ski instructor. I don't think we had more than a couple. And that's when me and him started our after school program. And then a few years after I got here, we took over the PE classes, and we grew that because that was a way for us to grow our business.
Well, and to explain, you know, Michigan Tech students, as part of the curriculum, you know, there's a requirement that they take how many, Josie?
3 credits of PE, and usually each PE class is half a credit. Some are a full credit, but those usually are the ones that run the full 14 weeks. But most of the on snow ski classes only run for the first 7 weeks of the semester.
We do have
I'm a huge fan of these because there's a whole bunch of scientific evidence that shows that when you exercise, you sleep better, you learn better. You know, I mean, it's just a well-known learning fact that exercise is good for you.
Oh, I completely agree.
Your other PE classes, Josie, is your patrol class, which is how many credits? The OEC?
So OET only counts for a PE credit, and that's 1 full credit. But the other class, and I'll get into it when we kind of talk a little bit about ski patrol.
Oh, okay.
We have kind of 2 classes that we are required to do.
All right, there we go. So I'm the general manager, ski school service manager is Esa Leppänen, a young man from Finland, who we love very much. Lifts and grooming, I just started. I hired Scott Jackson last year. He has a ski area management background like I do, and a bachelor's of business from Northern, and been working in the business for about a dozen years now. And total staff, it says 106, but we're at about 126 right now. Mostly are part-time and student employees. We have 4 full-time regular employees and 3 year-round employees that are temporary employees. And then our ski patrol, our volunteer staff that's a fluctuating number. We're about 75 this year. And again, it's about 50% local residents, 50% MTU students.
And what are we seeing?
This is one of the most amazing things about Mont Ripley is on Winter Carnival. Our culmination of the Winter Carnival happens on Saturday. This year, what is that? Saturday the 11th? Yeah.
Yep.
And that's our fireworks display, which is put on. Everything is put on at Winter Carnival by Blue Key, which is an amazing organization. My son was in it when he was a tech student, and it's kind of like an honorary degree or program or club that puts on Winter Carnival. And what we're at 101 years now, I think, which is amazing. And I tell you, when Winter Carnival, that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Winter Carnival, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It's just amazing. You know, you look down the canal and there's snowmobiles running up and down, and the ski hill, people are skiing, and there's just so much activity and people walking around looking at the statues, and restaurants are full. It's just wonderful. It's just a great place. It's a place for a Hallmark Christmas movie or something like that.
Well, I would like to jump in here for a second and extend an offer to anybody who is going to be in town on that Saturday afternoon of Winter Carnival to come meet us at the chalet at about 7:45 Saturday night after the hockey game and take part in the torchlight parade with Nick and myself.
But you can see over on the left side or the west side of the hill, that red streak going down is our torchlight parade, which is just, it's an amazing picture.
Love it. Awesome.
All right, next slide.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about ski patrol and then the student perspective on things. So we are actually one of the oldest patrols in the country. We were established in 1936, correct?
38.
Dan?
38.
Our patrol originally started in 36 before we joined the national organization in 38.
Right.
So we are older than the ski patrol, the national ski patrol themselves. Another really cool thing about it is a lot of our training that I'm going to talk about. Some of it originated with Mont Ripley patrollers, which is also really cool. So in order to become certified with the ski patrol, everyone is required to take 2 different courses. The first one is outdoor emergency transport, which is all of your different necessary ski or snowboard skills, as well as toboggan transport. So in the photo on here, that is me in the back and another student patroller in the front transporting someone in a toboggan. So that's a kind of a little action shot of what we do on patrol. The other part of becoming certified with patrol is outdoor emergency care. And so this is the entire first aid certification. It's very similar to the National Responder Program, but it's really focused on outdoor environments. And you have to pass those 2 courses in order to become part of the National Ski Patrol and the Mont Ripley Ski Patrol. As Nick mentioned, we are a volunteer patrol, and students at Michigan Tech, as well as community members, each volunteer a minimum of 80 hours a season to Mont Ripley. We do a huge service to the Hill. I know Nick is very appreciative of us. Nick is also very supportive of our patrol, and we know that we could not run without each other. So it's a really cool thing that I think Michigan Tech students can get involved with. Not only do they get really great first aid medical experience, but they also get to become part of a national organization as well as a community within Mont Ripley while they're at school. So that's a little bit about ski patrol. And then I was really going to talk about how important Mont Ripley is to me and a lot of the other students at Michigan Tech right now. So 25% of our incoming freshmen come to Michigan Tech for snow sports. And as of this year, we've have about 46% of our students have a season past Mont Ripley, which is a huge percent of our student body. There's so many clubs that are involved on the Hill. There's ski patrol, there's the Michigan Tech race team, the ski race team, the snowboard race team. There's just the Mont Ripley Ski and Snowboard Club that's through Michigan Tech. All these different orgs really use the ski hill as a way to get involved with Michigan Tech and find kind of their peers. We also offer so many different PE classes that take place on Mount Ripley. Again, most of them are half credits. I know the outdoor emergency transport class, we get a full credit for that. But a lot of the students also work at the Hill if they're not part of patrol. I know a lot of the lift operators and the rental staff are all students. So, I mean, for me personally, Mount Ripley was a huge draw for me to come to Michigan Tech. My dad was a Ripley patroller way back in the day, and he is still a member of the National Ski Patrol going on 42 years, I'm pretty sure. So just being able to come to Michigan Tech and then use that as a gateway to become part of an awesome organization was really beneficial for me. I know that I spend probably a little bit too much time at the ski hill. I'm there at least 3 or 4 times a week. And so it's been a really great way for me to kind of find my community at Tech and meet a lot of different people. So I cannot speak highly enough of Mount Ripley and what it has done for me through all my years at Tech, and just how supportive everyone is there as well.
It's amazing to see the quality of students that come and get involved. It just mind blowing, you know, and then of course they're Josie and her other students in patrol are volunteering 80 and plus hours every year, 80 hours and plus on that, and plus still in to school and trying to keep their grades up, and yeah, they're an amazing group of kids, and it makes me feel the future is good.
I mean, we do it because we love it. Every student on patrol, or even every student I see at Mount Ripley, whether they're just free skiing, whether they're part of the race team, whether they're part of the snowboard race team, whatever it may be, they are so passionate about skiing and snowboarding, and they are so passionate about Mount Ripley, and that they are able to come to college and have that right in their backyard. So it's Ripley is a special place.
Josie, what are you studying?
I am studying, sorry, the slides jumped a little bit on me. I am studying biomedical engineering here.
Biomedical engineering?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. And where are you in your years of study?
Yep, so I am currently in my 5th year. So this is my last semester. I'm not even a full-time student this semester. So what has also been beneficial for me at Tech is I was able to take a co-op. So I took a semester off and gained a lot of experience within the
I don't think we call that off.
No, I was very busy that semester, but I was not taking classes. So I was pretty excited to be here for an extra year because I got an extra patrol season and an extra season.
And we were quite thankful.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to hand it back over to Nick to talk a little bit about the future of Mount Ripley.
The name of this is Sliding into the Future. And it's just kind of a pun, but Mount Ripley's, you know, it is the oldest ski hill in the state of Michigan. 1933 is when that rope tow went up, and so we have about 8 years ago, when I was 55 years old, I put together a 10-year plan of what needs to happen to sustain Mount Ripley into the future. And most of the things got done. The tubing park was on there, and we've identified three main ones, and a fourth one is we're doing a poll right now. So let's see. Yeah.
Yes. So the question is that we've been answering already is, what are the strategic needs of Mont Ripley right now?
Right, and so. Here is number one and foremost is what we want to do is we want to sustain Mount Ripley into the future. And as I said earlier, we've saturated our market of our local community. We're getting a good draw from our local community, and our schools, 40% of the students have passes, which is, you know, a saturation in some, because that's an amazing number to have that big of a people coming out to a ski hill. That's not the norm of you know, only about 1% of the United States ski. And so our chalet was built in '65, and although it's standing and in decent shape, it's too small. Our cafeteria can only sit about 70 people, and on a weekend we're skiing 800, and it's pretty tight. So we need it doesn't have to be a new chalet. It just has to be added on because this is a really unique building, and I wouldn't want to see the core of this building go away. I'd like to see it be added on to. A little bit to the north, out in the front, an A-frame, so you don't have to bend down and look underneath the table to see the top of the mountain. And out into the parking lot where we could put some of our access, our bigger rental shop, ski shop, ticket office where you actually walk in to get your tickets, and you're in the rental where you have to get your lesson and your rental and everything, and a nice design like that. Also, so people that 200-mile circle I tell you about around the ski hill in the Midwest, that includes Green Bay. That's our biggest draw in the Upper Peninsula, and we don't do a great deal of business from there because our chalet is pretty uncomfortable, and and skiers from a regional market, they come to have a vacation, a weekend out, and then they like a little more luxury, and our chalet doesn't give them that. Also, our hill, your average family of 4, let's say, 2 of them can rip, one of them's okay, and one of them's always not that good of a skier. And we don't have a beginner hill from the top of this hill to the bottom. It's a difficult hill. It is the most difficult hill in the state of Michigan, I would say. I mean, Bohemia, they've got us a little bit on that, but all the others south of us, no, this is a more difficult hill. We've already identified that run. I already got about 1/3 of it done. Before the Father's Day flood, we were kind of moving towards getting it done. And then the flood knocked out that whole side of the hill, which now has been fixed, and it's pretty awesome. So we can start focusing on that. We need to build 2 bridges over the river, or the creek, that caused all the damage. And then we would have that beginner run, and it's a true beginner run. It's nothing over 15% grade, and it's down in a big valley, and it's just beautiful. There's old growth pine in there, and it would be something like, and something really special that happened during that time that I thought would really say, oh, no way are we getting a trail there. But they had to do an archaeological study when the storm damage hit, and they found ancient mining. I'm talking 7,000-8,000-year-old pits where they were extracting copper near where we want to put the trail, but it won't be right where we put the trail. And the archaeologist that was doing the work was excited that we want to put a trail there. He said we could make a walking path through this archaeological dig, this site. And there's also some historic mining in there as well, some vents that come out right on that trail. From the mining from the 1800s and 1900s. And so it would become a multi-use trail year round, definitely, and the easiest way up the hill. And then last, when we put in this beginner run and we get this new chalet, we're going to have more people coming, and we need more parking. And we have a house right next door to our copper lift that's abandoned, is condemned. We could easily fit another 50 or 60 parking spots in there, which would definitely help. So the answer is is all of the above. We need all 3 of these things, and we also would like to put in a fund, an equipment fund for the future for groomers and major breakdowns on lifts. There's a couple of hills around us right now that have had major breakdowns, and we're dealing with old equipment. Ours is kept up. Our companies that our lifts are still in business, so that's cool. There are a lot of ski hills in the Midwest that have lifts on their property that the company went out of business years ago. And in the Midwest, last year there was 6 brand new lifts built, and there's about 6 or 8 more going in this summer. So there are money being invested. So with that being all said, on the chat, I had put a link to our giving page. We are in the start of a fundraising right here, and it's on the chat as well, we're starting to raise money for the new chalet, for the beginner run, to purchase the property next door to us. If you can tell the color of my beard, I've been here a while. And Dan and I's greatness we're probably starting to fade out. I've got a couple more seasons in me here if everything goes right. and I'm happy to do it because I love this so much. But I also have 2 grandchildren that skied 5 times last year, and only 1 time I was with them. And Bappa wants to go skiing with the kids, and so I'm probably going to be in about 2 more years. So I'd like to start this rolling. So I don't see it coming to fruition while I'm here, but it needs this big push to get started so that this thing is happening, so these things can improve. And when we're busy, it seems like pandemonium because our chalet is so busy, and right in front of our chalet is so busy. But out on the hill, lots of room. You know, we have 3 lifts, and there's only a 5. You know, on our very busy day, that's a 5-minute wait to get on the onto the one of those 3 lifts. And if one of them is real busy, the other 2 probably have more room. So those are the things that we're trying to improve on. Those are the things we're trying to sustain us into the future. And I think those are the things that are needed to sustain us into the future. We've got, you know, we've added a lot of runs in our time here in my 23 years that I've been here, and we've added a lot of product. We've added a lot of programs, and basically we're just copying those that are already successful in it. Other ski areas that have done this. We've not really invented the one thing that we do, though. Although this isn't a good year to brag about it, but we are #1 with snow. I mean, every year it seems like, and the year ain't over. I mean, we could really catch up pretty quick here. And that's a wonderful thing. You know, if every business needs a special reason why I would go there or get that, or, and our reason is our snow. We just get massive amounts of snow. And even though it's a down year, people coming from south up here, they'll come to Houghton and like, wow, look at all this snow. And we're like, oh, we hardly have any, you know.
Well, gosh, Nick, this is, and Dan and Josie, thank you so much for you know, this talk. This has been so fascinating for me, and I look forward to that beginner trail being installed.
You and me both. I mean, I've been over there so many times, and it's just really beautiful to walk through there. And I almost would like to just keep it myself and hike over there because it is really calming down there.
Yeah.
But that's
so
what I like to do.
What I'd like to do is kind of move to the Q&A now. And so Josie and Dan and Nick, you can, Josie, maybe you can pull up the first question. And while you're selecting one, I just want to let everybody know that I knew this was going to be an important presentation that would run long. So at 7 o'clock, I'm going to thank everybody for joining us. We'll stop the recording, but we will stay on and answer more questions. So I just want to let you know that we will be doing that. So with that, Josie.
So, hey,
Yes.
Josie, I've been answering some of the questions. There's several people who have asked what the cost of a student pass is.
You just read my mind, Dan. I was just going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So actually now I know there was one person that dropped in the chat that when they were at Tech, a season's pass for students was $20. So now how they do season passes at Ripley for students is actually part of our tuition. So it's included in that experience tech fees, which, you know, gets us into the hockey games for free.
Golf course,
it gives us Ripley, the Rose stuff, all sorts of stuff within that realm. So that is where we get our seasons pass from. It's included in that cost. So it kind of, I don't know, I'm like, oh wow, it's kind of free, but then I remember I'm paying through that. But
I say skiing at Mont Ripley is fee.
yes.
And that fee for the experience tech fee this year is $99 per semester for all of those 8 or 9 things, which Mont Ripley is part of.
So it's really still a steal for students.
And so let's try to answer questions as much as we can out loud. So, and you were going to take turns. Dan, you pick a question. Josie, you pick a question. Dan, you're next.
We've had several questions asked about grooming. Yeah, there were groomers back in the 70s and 80s, but basically they could push snow when we had enough, and they could pack snow. But to effectively create a skiing base, a skiable base, they really couldn't do that. And the old Thiokol Sprite that we had, that was an early pushing machine. The groomers we have now are light years better.
We create structure, our terrain
Absolutely.
park, 40-foot jumps, and a tubing park for that matter.
Right.
Josie.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking through a lot of one of these, and I know this one's going to be directed more towards Nick. But one question that was asked, is there any future plans to include greater accessibility leading to adaptive skiing opportunities?
That's always one that has come up, but my sister is a big component of adaptive skiing down at Crystal Mountain in Lower Michigan. She goes up there usually 3 weekends a year and as a guide, and has gone through the schooling. And she skied here often. And I asked her about that. I take her as more of an expert than I'll ever be in that. And she says we need that beginner run. I mean, to get interactive skiing or interpretive skiing here, we have a great run up to Midway, and that would work. But we don't have anywhere to take them after that, and that's always the biggest problem is our steepness. The beginner run would help that, but yes, I would love to start a program, but it would be limited to only going up to the Midway. But our beginner run is one of the best and widest and nicest, and we have the T-bar that feeds it, and I think that would work just fine. I see a question from Tom Permoda, wondered why the Lake Superior or water is so good. The most amazing thing, the first time I ever made snow in 2000 here, the water in the canal was 50 degrees on the day we started, but we had a nice cold spell coming in of about 25 degrees. And I had to get my crew to figure out how to make snow. So we started, and we knew it wasn't going to be that much with 50-degree water. And I was here till about 11, and I went home. And about 1 in the morning, my snowmaker called me up and said, "Your guns aren't making snow." And, my mind and waking up in the middle of the night is they're on fire or something like that. I came right away, and what I saw was these beautiful sublimating plumes going up to space. And I thought, how could that be, with 50-degree water? And so I go turn some valves on, and it started making nice snow again. I go down, and the water had went in an 8-hour period of time from 50 degrees to 38 degrees. And I've over time, I figured out what happened. And it was windy, and there were 12-foot waves on Lake Superior over on in the breakers coming in. And that cold water, that lake flipping over, pushes all that warm water out to the west or to the east, and comes in from the west, and voila, cold water instantly. And it's just, that's the main reason. There's also a really nice black algae in that, which no snowflake can form. Even a man-made snowflake can form around pure water. It has to have some solid, and that's the amazing part about it.
It needs a nucleus.
Correct. Yep. And every snow gun has a thing on it called a nucleator that makes that nucleus when we're making snow.
Awesome.
There's a question here about Fred Lonsdorf. How long was he at the Hill? He started in 1947, 1976 approximately. He was moved over to the physical plant, and then he left the university in 1979.
One thing about Fred that you didn't mention is that most ski areas in the United States had a component. Fred was our component. He was a 10th Mountain Division guy,
right?
World War II 10th Mountain, fighting in the Italian Alps. And most of those guys came back and said, "Hey, that was, even though they were shooting at me, that was kind of fun, And a good majority of the ski hills in the United States, although Mont Ripley was started, it was already here before that. He brought it to the next level.
He brought it to the next level and really did a great job promoting alpine ski racing in the Midwest. And the four Olympic racers we've had, Chuck Ferries, Barbara Ferries, Noni Foley, and Mary Seaton. They're all students that came, people that came through training with Fred. So he's quite a piece of it. But to back into Fred a little bit, we had a run. Carrie will remember this, and some of the older patrollers who are on the list will remember we had a run called the Jump Landing. back in sometime after 2000, after Nick came on board, we put our heads together and renamed that Fred's Landing. And it is known as that today. It's on our maps as Fred's Landing in his honor.
We're making our last little bit of snow on it tonight as we speak.
Exactly.
We have a question. What happened to Mount Ripley what has to happen at Mount Ripley to get alpine skiing back to a varsity sport? Interesting that they say Northern Michigan just started a varsity ski team 2 years ago. This is the second year for it. That to become a varsity sport, it's through athletics, and our athletic director would be the person to talk to on that one.
I'm going to guess a generous donation would help.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That is
Just
part
a
of
guess.
it. Yep. I mean, there would have to be a coach, and there would have to be, to put together a varsity team, there would have to definitely be some dollars brought in.
Well, and related with that, Paul, I can't say his last name, but Paul, it begins with SCZ. What's the estimated cost for the new chalet?
So what I see of is a $5 million project. The chalet would be 3 million of that. The new trail would be a $500,000. The parking, extra parking would be about $250,000. And then our fund to equipment fund would be about $1 million. So when we first started out talking about a new chalet, it was 2001, the year after I got here, and Dan Lorenzetti and Bob said, well, that's the next place they want to go. And I'm like, okay, you know your customers better than me. I had just started working here. And I put out a survey, and the survey blew me away. They all said, you know, a chalet is nice, but we would like another lift on the east side. And so our copper lift, that's where our original fundraising for the chalet went. And then fundraising kind of stopped for a while there. And they went, you know, we are now at the point where they said, okay, yeah, you can go out and try to raise money. It's been many years before we couldn't do that because they were working on a much larger focus, which they're doing still, but they understand that we're in need of that. And the best way for us to get that is going to be through fundraising. We have enough money to sustain ourselves, to operate, but not grow. And you know, anyone that went to the School of Business, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so, you know, get in business, if the only way to the other side to success is to grow and change, and we're able to operate, but our growing needs are starting to have a harder time because these projects are getting so big that we finished all the little ones.
Well, and I'd like to point out the obvious: when you give in support of Mont Ripley, you are giving to Michigan Tech, and it is a charitable donation.
Exactly.
And so why is it Mont Ripley instead of Mount Ripley?
I have a theory, but so Mont actually is more of a French term, right? Mont de Lac and Mont. There's a lot of Mont Blanc, and Mount is more of a Scandinavian term or European term, and so there was an awful lot of French people that lived in the area. And I would assume they had a lot to do with it back then, and it went from Mount to Mont, and but I've never heard any stories of why really it changed to that or became that.
All right. Well, I have a ski patroller question from Matthew, and maybe Dan and Josie can make a stab, I guess.
I remember Matthew.
Yeah.
So
So do I.
he's a former student from 96 to 02. And a former ski patroller at Ripley and Bohemia. Thank you. He's carried on to North Star, California now, but he wanted to know, does anybody have any idea how many Ripley patrollers are on today's Zoom call? So if you recognized any names out of the attendees, do you see any names you recognize, Josie?
I've been looking. I've seen two I know for sure. One is Riley Walters is currently an active patroller, as well as Ashlyn Steer. She just graduated last year, but she patrolled with us last season. Those are two that I see right away on the list.
Yeah, Kerry Ayers was there when I started as a patroller. And then a gentleman I've never met before, Eric Peterson, said he was on the patrol from 67 to 70.
As well as Stacy, what was her last name? Siebold. She said that she was on patrol from 84 to 85, as well as was a lift operator. And actually that was the same time that my dad was here. So my dad was a Ripley patroller, 84 to 88.
So, and I was here at that point patrolling, so I should remember, but Stacy, I apologize for not remembering you. And another, Carrie Irons brought up another individual who's not on the call, Steve Rosso, who moved out to Alta and became a central figure in their avalanche program as a patroller. So yeah, we've got some folks.
So it sounds like at least 10, up 10 to 12 and possibly more. And so it would be good to actually, Nick, why don't you add your email to the chat? Actually, all of you add your emails to the chat in case anybody wants to reach back to you.
I would gladly.
Well, and I just wanted to point out, because this makes me laugh. He says the only time, this is from Ray, the only time I went down Mont Ripley was on a motorcycle in 1960.
I saw that. I've had that happen in my time. Definitely.
I've done it on a bicycle once, and it was would have been very entertaining if people had seen it.
Did you stay on your bike?
I did not. The bike went one direction, I went the other, and I will say I mostly landed on my feet. After I rejoined the bike, we continued to walk down the rest of the way.
There you go. All right, so we are going to stay on. I am going to officially kind of thank everybody for joining us. You have been listening to Michigan Technological University's free Zoom webinar series called Husky Bites. And we've been learning about Mont Ripley, which is our free ski hill for Michigan Tech students, and also at a really nice discount for the community. And at this point, we're going to stop the recording, but we're going to keep answering questions for those of us who are here live. And there are still 26 open questions. So you guys get to go at high rapid speed.
All right.
Remember to answer, if you're answering it, click answer live and then click done.